This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome in, everybody, to the April edition of the High Stakes Lowdown. It is April 2nd, 2024. I am Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, and, of course, the Fantasy Football Players Championship over at myffpc.com. You can follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. Follow the FFPC on X at FFPC. Speaking of the FFPC, big news last week, we announced that we are now in the Empire business. That's right. We're doing Empire Leagues over at myffpc.com. What is an Empire League? Well, it's a Dynasty League with a twist. Basically, half the pot every year goes into the Empire pot, and any team that is winning 2 consecutive years will automatically get that year's pot plus whatever the Empire pot has built up to, and then the league immediately disbands and everybody gets their deposits back, and you move on to the next Empire League. That's at myffpc.com. Just have them at the $100 level right now, but we'd be looking to expand based on, I don't even know, I think we got like 10 or 11 filled already, so you never know when those price points are going to expand there. We also have some Dynasty startups listed. Dynasty Orphans, we're running out of teams there, so if you want to pick up on a good deal, myffpc.com is where to go. You're going to get a lot of good deals on some good teams, starting at the $77 level all the way up to the $2,500 level. The Fantasy Pros Championship is live. Win $1 million by drafting in April. Who would have thunk it? You can make it happen now. $6 million prize pool. Those drafts are going off via slow and live at myffpc.com. And, of course, at myffpc.com as well. You are looking at the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournaments, a pair of them, the Classic and the Superflex. The Superflex tournament, $35 to enter. You will be eligible for a $10,000 grand prize. And the Classic one is $125 entry fee, but we're giving away a $25,000 grand prize. Remember, those leagues will those drafts will cease on April 25th at the start of the NFL draft. So if you want to play in the Never Too Early tournament, get in now. Live drafts, slow drafts, 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour and 6-hour clocks available there for you at myffpc.com. Enough of that. Let's move on and tell you to like, subscribe, share this video and on this channel. Make sure you subscribe to it and then get notified every time we go live going forward, which will be again on Thursday night. More to come on that later on in the show. Without further ado, let's bring him on. He's an 8-time FFPC Dynasty League champion. You follow him on X at Stew Kuehne, one of the 26ers. We got royalty in the house tonight. It is Stew Kuehne. Stu, welcome into the program, man.
Hey, Balky, how are you?
Doing good, doing good. How are things in your neck of the woods?
Beautiful.
How I should ask you this. I'll kick things off with this. You play in a lot of Dynasty leagues with the FFPC. How much college football are you watching? How much do you pay attention to college football during the season, knowing that you'll be drafting some of these guys, come May after the NFL draft?
Well, most of the college football I watch is what used to be the Pac-12. So those I'm most familiar with.
And go ahead. Keep going. I'm sorry.
And the rest of them pretty much not so much.
Okay. So when does your because you'll know what pick you have at the end of the season. When does your prep for okay, well, what am I looking at for rookie drafts here? Who do I like? Who do I not like? Do you do anything extra once the NFL season ends as far as scouting and researching any of these players?
Oh, yeah. Basically take a look at what's available online because there's so many great analysts out there that do all that heavy lifting. Take that into account, especially when it comes down to cut downs at the end of March on those dynasty teams. And man, that is just fraught with much anxiety.
How did cut down day go for you, Stu?
It went good. I did it a couple days beforehand. I tried to make some moves, do some trades, but basically, if the value wasn't there, it was just like, okay, I'm just going to cut it loose. If I like them enough, I'll be able to pick them up probably in the later rounds of the rookie draft coming up. And yeah, it's just never ending when it comes to Dynasty. It's a lot of fun, especially when 4 leagues with these 26ers. Dang. I mean, I've been playing with these guys since 2017, and they are some sharks.
Well, and for anybody who's not familiar with the 26ers are basically a group of guys that started off at it's the $500 level, $500 Dynasty League number 26, right? And were you an original player in there, or did they rope you into that? How did that happen, Stu?
Oh no, I basically signed up for it and had no idea what I was getting into.
And now you are loving life because these guys are sharp, but it's a lot of fun playing with them because you're in a bunch of leagues with them.
Oh, they're a blast. I mean, you had Manning on a couple weeks ago, and he is just phenomenal. And you've got Jake, and you got Rafa, and you got Meat, and you got Beast, and these guys, some of them just really do a lot more research on the college level. And boy, when they give you an offer, the fun part is I'm known to being usually very polite in my response, even if I'm turning them down.
Well, listen, we're going to get into much more with that. We're going to get into some rookies, but let's kick things off here and talk about some veterans. Are there any receivers? Let's focus on Indianapolis here first. Are there any receivers on the Colts that are not named Michael Pittman that you have any kind of interest in this year?
Well, right now, pretty much Josh Downs is probably the guy. I like Pierce, even though he's a bigger wide receiver. Downs just seems to fit better in the slot. And he's 5'9", 171 pounds. Last season, he was wide receiver 44 in the FFPC scoring at 157 points. Pierce was wide receiver 73 at 95 points. He's a taller receiver, but Downs seems to be the number 2 guy in that offense. And I'm really excited. I only have one league of my dynasty with Richardson. And I'm really excited to see what he can do if he's healthy for the full season.
Do you feel that you are higher than the other FFPC Dynasty players on Josh Downs, or do you think that there actually is a pretty solid market out there for him right now?
I think there's a solid market for him. Pierce got dropped in a few leagues, but for the most part, Downs was not dropped at all.
Mm-hmm. I think, I don't know how much you thought about this, but like, what happened if the Colts didn't franchise Pittman? What happened if they let him go to free agency? Then all of a sudden you're looking at Josh Downs as like this incredible sharky buy. Now we don't have to deal with that. But he is the number 2 option. I mean, would you consider him the number 2 pass catcher on the team ahead of Jonathan Taylor at this point?
Wow, that's a good question. The answer is, I believe, yes.
Mm-hmm. I think he's an interesting guy. Given like it's one of those things, Stu, that like when you have a player like Pittman and a guy like Jonathan Taylor, just on the surface, you look at how good can Downs be with those 2, monoliths on the team, right? But that actually might make him a little bit more valuable because people underrate how good he can be in that offense and how talented he was coming into the pros and he's had a nice little NFL career since he left college too. So I'm kind of with you on Josh Downs is a sneaky guy. And he was an easy guy to, when you got to cut down, obviously you have shallower rosters in the FFPC, but I assume you kept him on most of your teams, right?
Absolutely. He was not one of my drop candidates.
Okay. All right. Here's another interesting guy. So we're at this weird time of the season, Stu, that we have the NFL draft coming at the end of the month. We've had the first couple waves of free agency done. And if we look at the Cowboys running game, they don't have an Ezekiel Elliott there. They don't have a Tony Pollard there. They don't have an Emmitt Smith there. They don't have they have Rico Dowdle. That's basically what they have right now. So there's a lot of people that believe the Cowboys will be investing a second, maybe a 3rd round pick on a running back in this year's draft. Now that running back may or may not be a bell cow type guy. More than likely, he's going to be a solid part of a committee with Rico Dowdle. If you own Dowdle right now in any of your dynasty leagues, what should you be doing with him? Should you be looking to acquire him in case the Cowboys don't invest in running back? Or is this the opportunity to sell him to see what you can get for him? I don't know what kind of market he has right now, but I do know it's him and Deuce Vaughn in that backfield and not much else.
I was just really disappointed how much or how little Dallas did in free agency so far. I thought for sure they'd address it. And Dowdle was on that sort of borderline cut list, but everywhere I had Dowdle, I did not trade him, but there weren't much in the way of offers coming my way for him. And I did see a few of my compatriots and some of my other dynasty leagues who in fact did drop him. Mm-hmm. And really depends on your running back depth, but for a guy who might be the lead back, depending on if Dallas wakes up and does something in free agency, I believe, yes, they will pick up a running back, but this running back class is not exactly knocking your socks off. So as I had Dowdle, I did not cut him, even though I had probably some guys I did cut that were higher rated, mostly on the wide receiver side. It is so hard in the running back, especially in Dynasty, to get someone who might actually perform on a consistent level. Most of them are in committee anyways. But
right.
So I did not cut loose Dowdle at all. And we'll see, especially after this draft. There might be a market for him. I wouldn't turn down a trade offer, but for right now, I'm hanging on to him.
Would you be looking, because now you can kind of manipulate your roster however you want to in the FFPC. Would you give up like let's say a third round pick? Would you give up a third round pick to acquire a guy like Dowdle?
And I might. I mean, right now the price as I was being offered was in that 4th and 5th range.
Right.
And really depending on how that draft goes, or like you said, sometimes being proactive and doing this before the rookie draft and rolling that dice, especially in those situations. Like I have one league where I only have 2 running backs that I kept just because I had so much depth, and it actually was a flex league. And so you just can't give up those quarterbacks. And so my running back was the one I was just sort of hanging. Okay, these are and I'll see what I can do in free agency and draft wise. I'm not comfortable at all only having 2 running backs, but sometimes that happens.
It does happen, especially in Superflex. I mean, Superflex means super fun, super maddening sometimes too, and super fun roster constructions. Permar99 hanging out with us saying that regardless, he thinks the Cowboys are signing Ezekiel Elliott. There's a non-zero chance of that. It wouldn't surprise me at all. And the ultimate, the worst case scenario for Dowdle is they sign a guy like Elliott and they draft somebody like Trey Benson in the second round. And all of a sudden Dowdle's like basically worthless at that point, because you probably need to get 2 guys hurt on that offense in order for him to have fantasy value, which still could happen. Devin Singletary is another interesting running back. I checked after Barkley left the Giants for the Eagles and Singletary ended up going to the Giants. I checked how many dynasty spots I had Devin Singletary on, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Stu, but I was actually upset that I didn't have more Devin Singletary on my rosters, which is a weird thing to say. He's in New York now. I mean, obviously the Giants could add a running back. I like Singletary because several things. I always think he's underrated. I think he's a good running back with decent instincts. Not a guy that's going to wow you, but he does have some good pass catching chops as well. Singletary, is he a sneaky little buy right now for maybe a number 3 and number 4 running back?
I just looked on him and I've got him in 4 leagues. And I like Singletary a lot. I mean, last year he was RB23. He's only 26 years old. 167 points last year, but there's no depth. The Giants have picked 6, 47, and 70 coming up, and they really need a quarterback.
Well, they need a lot, Stu. Like they need receivers too. It's just like it's great. Like we don't know what's going on with Darren Waller. They could use a tight end as well. Like that, and that's the other thing that makes Singletary so compelling is if the Giants have all these other needs. I mean, they have Singletary now. Are they really going to invest one of those first 3 picks, first, second, or third round pick into a running back? My guess is no. And then that's another reason to like Singletary, right?
Yeah. And right now, what we've seen the last couple of years, some of those guys in that 6th, 7th rounds, that they wait on those running backs on those drafts, and some of those guys end up surprisingly performing.
Mm-hmm. I looked at their depth chart just now. They do have Eric Gray. Remember when Eric Gray was a thing in rookie drafts last year? Gary Brightwell is still on that roster. And then I know Scott Connor from Dynasty Trades and 5, longtime FFPC player. He loved Jashawn Corbin coming into last year as well. And he's still on the roster. But none of these guys are threats at all to him in that backfield. Jake Felice, one of your fellow 26ers. I can't stand Singletary, but he's going to be very viable this year as he pipes in the YouTube chat room. Like, this is turning into the Devin Singletary episode. It's crazy, Stu, but this is the type of stuff that we need to figure out to get our dynasty teams in order. And I think the growing consensus here is like, none of us love Singletary, but we all kind of like him.
And if someone was offering him up, I'd do a 3rd round pick on him. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I would totally give up a 3rd round rookie pick for Devin Singletary right now. Let's shift the focus to my Packers here. I feel like I've been bringing this up to high stakes players ever since the Packers took Musgrave in the 2nd round last year and then took Tucker Kraft in the 3rd. How much dynasty value do you think Musgrave has right now in Green Bay as long as he's on the same team as Tucker Kraft? Josiah DeGuara, who was the number 3 tight end, basically a name last year, wasn't really much of an offensive threat, is now gone. He plays for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Musgrave and Kraft on the same team. When one of them's hurt, the other one usually is pretty good. The problem is if they're both healthy, they're really difficult to trust. Do you have a good feeling on which one of these guys you'd rather have for Dynasty, Stu?
Well, right now, for Dynasty, everywhere I had Luke Musgrave, I was keeping him. Tucker Kraft, I actually cut him free in a few of the leagues because of that tight cut down. I'm going to have some fun. I'm heading your direction in July. I'm hoping to go to my first Green Bay Packers shareholder meeting.
Oh, I've been to them. I was at it one time. I don't know how many years ago it was, but Roger Goodell was there. And I said, "Hey, Commish, you're doing a great job." I didn't really believe that at the time, but I wanted to see if I could get his attention. And I was about 10 rows up in the stands, and he looked at me and waved at me. And that's like my claim to fame, that Roger Goodell once waved to me and smiled. It was great. It was a lot of fun. I didn't realize you're a shareholder, though.
Oh yeah, my daughter married a gentleman from Wisconsin, from Madison, and so each one of them also have a share, and it's right near his birthday. So we're going to go up to Door County.
Oh yes,
celebrate his birthday. I've never been to Wisconsin, so we're going to have some fun.
Yeah, Door County's great. AJ Dillon is basically the unofficial mayor of Door County. He loves it up there. He's always giving all the little bars and restaurants shout outs on interviews that he likes to hang out up there. And now the Packers have AJ Dillon back again this season on a 1-year deal. So his mayorship will continue through in Door County for at least another year. It's beautiful up there. Just fantastic. There's so much to do. The scenery's awesome. The shareholders meeting is interesting because we had some guy come last year in a full-on Aaron Jones uniform. And when I say uniform, helmet, shoulder pads, jersey, thigh pads, knee pads, pants, cleats, everything. That's how he showed up at the shareholders meeting. It's a scene. It's an interesting thing. I went to it once. I would do it again. It was fun. I think you're going to have a great time. And as far as Musgrave and Kraft go, it sounds like you're team Musgrave.
I am team Musgrave. I love Kraft, and basically, on a rookie draft, if he's been dropped and hanging around in that, 5th, 6th, 7th round, and I need some tight end depth, even if I have Musgrave, I'm okay with snagging Kraft.
Let's see here. What do I want to get into? How about Tua Tagovailoa? Stu, this is interesting. So I'm going to bring up the ADP, and I know we're talking Dynasty, but I feel like I should bring up the ADP in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. And by the way, anytime we cite ADP on this show, it's thanks to Darren Armani at Fantasy Mojo on the X, fantasymojo.com. If you play in the FFPC, a subscription to Fantasy Mojo is going to be well worth your while. Currently, as far as quarterbacks go, in the 2024 Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, despite having Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, Tua Tagovailoa is quarterback 12. He is Justin Herbert actually fell below him now after the Keenan Allen and Mike Williams exodus. So Tagovailoa is quarterback 12, but I mean, that's Jared Goff, Caleb Williams territory. He's going behind guys like Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray, Jordan Love. Your thoughts on Tua Tagovailoa as a dynasty asset? Is 2024 going to be another good season for him? He looked really, really good in stretches last year, but other stretches he didn't look so good.
Well, and he basically ended up QB9. I'm looking at the Fantasy Mojo 2023 FFPC players.
Oh, sure.
And yes, I do subscribe. So it's a fabulous site. And basically, my notes, I basically wrote myself that I expect him to be a top 10 to 12 quarterback. He may not be 9. I expect a fairly similar result, but a lot of it really depends where some of these other guys who were underperforming, who were behind him last year. I mean, Herbert was QB 18, and just it's just really kind of. But if I am not going to reach for him, I think 12 is a good number for him. That would be if he was. Basically, if I waited on QB and I ended up with Tua, and then I could fill in really quickly after that on a redraft, I'd be a happy camper. And for Dynasty, I'd feel comfortable with him.
Is he a buy, sell, or hold for you if you have to pick one of those three? It sounds like a hold, right, Stu?
He's I'm not going to pay what someone will want for him, and no one was dropping him, and I'm not going to aggressively go after him.
Right. Let's go to the YouTube chat right now. Jake Felice, let's talk Sam Howell and Geno Smith out in Seattle. He wants to know what the chances are that Howell takes over for Smith at some point this year, or is he simply going to be a clipboard holder all year? I think this is important for Superflex Dynasty because if you don't believe in Smith, you should believe in Howell. And if you don't believe in Howell, well, now's the time to get him off your roster to somebody who does believe in him.
Well, and then the Seahawks local information, one of the, you watch all these guys and they talk about it, and they said the Seahawks will probably draft a rookie quarterback. And basically Howell tore up the Seahawks when they played him, and he played so solid. And so I think Geno, if they want UW offensive coordinator that the Seahawks have picked up, if he's as creative as he was last year with the Huskies, and I think Geno or Howell will do well in this scheme. I'm optimistic. I think with the new coach, we're not going to be making the playoffs, but I think it's going to be hopefully a more entertaining offense than it has been the last couple of years. But yeah, I think the Seahawks were smart to get Howell. I like him as a backup to Geno, and if Geno starts to have some Geno moments, I could see Howell coming in.
I think that's what makes me nervous about Geno Smith in a Superflex league, knowing that like this is a situation that might be short-lived, if Howell does take over. And you mentioned the possibility of the Seahawks drafting a quarterback. Well, as you pointed out, Ryan Grubb, offensive coordinator for the Washington Huskies, and guess who's in this draft? As AL points out in the chat, Michael Penix is out there too. So you could add a guy like Penix in maybe that I think he's probably going to go first round, but you never know with what you hear this time of year. Maybe Penix actually, when it comes down to it, he'll have the Will Levis effect where a lot of people are saying he's going to go in the first round and then he goes in the second. Maybe Seattle grabs him there. So I think that's interesting. Jake Felice also agrees, thinks that's a great spot for him if Penix were to go to Washington. The other thing I'll point out, Permar99, he thinks the best values this year for quarterbacks are Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence. And what's interesting about this to me, Stu, is Trevor Lawrence is quarterback 17 going at the end of the 10th round. Jordan Love is going as quarterback 9 at the start of the 8th round. I love Jordan Love. I mean, as a Packers fan for sure, but my goodness, do I love him in the 8th round? I don't know if that's the best value, but I guess maybe he could turn it on. Your thoughts on Jordan Love this year as being drafted as the quarterback 9 and then Trevor Lawrence being drafted as the quarterback 17?
With me, I would probably take Lawrence before Love. And I think Love just did fabulous last year. I mean, what a performance he did for Green Bay. But it just poor Trevor Lawrence has just really, not had the offensive weapons. I mean, he had Ridley in the gang, but it just basically.
And now Ridley's gone. That's the thing,
So it's one of those where hopefully he can bring it together. But right now, Jordan Love's got better tools.
Yeah. Jake JV also pointing out in the YouTube chat, I've been grabbing a lot of Will Levis in the Superflex tournament. Hard to see him not producing unless he gets benched. And there is something to be said for that. You don't have Derrick Henry anymore. You have Tony Pollard, who I think we can agree, is a better pass catcher than Derrick Henry, which benefits Levis. They add Calvin Ridley. They gave him all that guaranteed money, which makes me think they're going to use him. Treylon Burks now becomes a number 3 receiver because DeAndre Hopkins is still there. And there's still a lot of people, myself included, who kind of like Chig Okonkwo. I think that offense could undergo a transformation to be a little bit more, having a little bit more of a pass emphasis than they did last year. And if that's the case, wheels up for Will Levis. I don't really see him getting benched. I guess anything's possible. Will Levis is a sneaky guy in that never too early best ball tournament right now that with the ADP I'm looking at. Stu, he's quarterback 25. This should be a buy for people at this point, right?
No kidding. Oh, yeah. I mean, basically, if I had him on any of my Superflex, I certainly wasn't going to be dropping him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because I think he's a talented young man.
He and with another weapon, a really valuable weapon that he didn't have last year. Now he adds Ridley, and you don't really lose anything. Like, you're gaining another downfield threat, a guy who made a lot of plays last year with Jacksonville after, basically not playing in the league for 2 years. And he had a new offense, new OC, new head coach, new quarterback, new everything. And he passed with flying colors. I see no reason why he wouldn't put up big numbers again here. Let's shift to, let's not shift to rookies quite yet. Jake wants to know who is the receiver to get in Green Bay, Jaden Reed or Christian Watson, if his hamstring issues get figured out. There was, I can't remember if this was football or baseball, but there was always this conversation people would have about, and I can't remember the player either. It might have been Matthew Stafford. And people would talk about the Lions or the Rams, and they would say, well, I think this team could get to the Super Bowl as long as Matthew Stafford stays healthy. And it came to be the point where, like, you couldn't say Matthew Stafford without saying if he stays healthy. So it became Matthew if he stays healthy Stafford. And now we're kind of like in that area with Christian Watson. Christian if he stays healthy Watson. I know he's invested a ton of his own money to try to get these hamstring issues taken care of. I know the Packers sent him down. Actually, they sent him to Madison, Stu, because they had all this special medical equipment there. According to Christian Watson's father on X, he said they did find something there. The treatment plan is already in motion, and they think they figured it out. I remain skeptical. I'll believe it when I see it. I can't really find anybody at this point who values Christian Watson from a dynasty perspective more than Jaden Reed. I like Jaden Reed quite a bit. I'm taking him over Watson. How do you feel about that situation?
I'm with you on that one, Balky. Absolutely.
And Jake, hopefully that answers your question too. Jake also said Reed was so good down the stretch last year and that week 17 first half till he got injured. Yeah, that's true. That was against the Bears. I was at that game and I was like, oh man, they're going to screw the pooch and they're not going to make the playoffs now because Reed got hurt. But they pulled it out. They got to the playoffs. It was great to see. I think Reed's super talented. Was a guy that, were you high on him in the prior to the NFL draft? What did you think of Jaden Reed out of Michigan State before he got drafted?
Really didn't have enough, a whole lot on him. I mean, I drafted him based on my cheat sheets as they were coming up. And it was just impressive on the rookie drafts last year on what quality was available in that 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds on those. And you took the Flyers. I mean, it was just hilarious, especially when you look at what, where's he at now? Pukanaka. I mean,
oh yeah.
I'm just going, what the heck? And so I hate to admit it, but at least in one league, I dropped him when it was cut down time in September, the first week. And CJ Stroud, I had one $750 league where I had those two and I cut them both. And I'm still kicking myself on that one.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things. And I think that, the Puka Nacua thing is interesting too, because obviously I missed him on a ton of leagues. I think I have him on one dynasty league, maybe two. But I'm not upset because how often do we see something like that happen? I mean, it was such a freak of nature thing last year. You talk about once in a generation. That is a once in a generation thing where some guy who gets taken in the 4th round now becomes one of the best, arguably the wide receiver 1 in dynasty right now. I mean, I know there's some people out there that would have him that way, and I certainly can't fault them for having it. Speaking of rookies last year, now let's get to the rookies this year. Quarterback for your Superflex leagues. Pre-draft process, Stu, we're still about 3 weeks away from the NFL draft. Who's your favorite quarterback in this class for fantasy purposes?
For fantasy purposes, I mean, it's pretty much the consensus. It's hard to discount Caleb Williams. You know Chicago's going to take him. And basically with Chicago loading up with, DeAndre Swift running back, but getting Keenan Allen to pair up with DJ Moore. And, oh, my God, they've got the, number 9 pick?
Yep.
You're just going, what the heck? Are they going to go with another wide receiver? Some guys even have him going Brock Bowers. And I don't think so, but it's just like, wow, he is going to have the opportunity to really do something. And it's hard not to have him be your favorite.
I really like the idea. And, I'm obviously not a Bears fan, but if I was a Bears fan, I like the idea, not necessarily pairing them up with Bowers or Odunze or somebody like that. I like the idea of getting like another foundational piece on that offensive line. I think that can do wonders for Williams long term. And if you get the right guy, I mean, you could, hopefully pencil him in for a decade, left tackle, right tackle, whatever. So I like the idea of doing that. They obviously need some help on defense too, but I think the Bears have a really good opportunity to not just take a step forward this year, but take a leap forward as far as how good their offense is going to be. I think Vegas set their win total like 8.5 or something like that too. So it should be a good season for Chicago. We'll see if it happens that way. There's been plenty other times where I was high on the Bears offense and they massively let me down. So that could happen again. Now, you said that you watched a lot of Pac-12 football. A guy who I believe only played 1 year for the University of Oregon, he was previously with Minnesota, was Bucky Irving, a guy that, it's hard for me to say he's the most polarizing running back in this class, but he's right up there. I've read a lot of stuff and heard a lot of people talk about why they love him, why they think if he falls into the right situation, he could be massive for fantasy purposes. And then I have other people telling me he's too small, he's not athletic enough, he's going to need a lot of help and a lot of things to fall his way in the pros. How do you feel about Bucky Irving? What kind of a pro is he going to be?
That's going to be interesting because he's not big enough to be, every down back. Oregon, with Bo Nix and, that very creative coaching scheme that they have, he had over 1,000 yards at Oregon, and he basically, some compare him to Tajay Spears.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'll be a complement back to a bigger back. And so he'll be in sort of that playing position. So he was very solid on the whole 9 yards, but I'm not big on him. I mean, they have him like in the top 10. I'm not sure I would put him as my top 10 in this rookie class.
Jake wants to know, as we combine a veteran with a rookie here at tight end. For dynasty purposes, I like Brock Bowers over Kyle Pitts, obviously. What about this year? Bowers or Pitts in redrafts, Stu?
Oh, boy, I would definitely go Pitts just because the fact he's got a quarterback, he's got a coach who isn't an idiot. And basically, it's one of those where if Pitts does not perform this year, then, oh, my God, he was just overrated.
Yeah.
And so basically, other than, last year, the tight end who did well, Sam Laporta. I mean, how many rookie tight ends perform like he did? And usually it takes a couple of years. And so Bowers, depending on who he goes to, I don't expect immediate impact, even though he's a very talented player. But with the right system like Laporta, he might.
Mm-hmm. Shifting back to running backs here real quick, Brent Studebaker, another 26er tuning in tonight. He wants to get your thoughts on Marshawn Lloyd. This is another guy who had a lot of buzz coming out of the Senior Bowl. He's been getting a lot of buzz just in among fantasy Twitter and the analysts that are there. I've seen a lot of people been talking him up. I did a Kentucky fantasy football draft, a state championship draft on Super Bowl Sundays too, and I think he was like my 4th running back I drafted there. I like him. I like him quite a bit. I think that going to the right situation is going to be big. It's all about opportunity for running backs. I like him in this draft. I put him right up there with. I'm not going to put him as my number 1 running back that I know some people have, but he's up there with Allen. He's up there with Benson. I mean, I like Marshawn Lloyd quite a bit. How about you?
I do too. I mean, it was fun to watch him run at USC. I mean, he's definitely a very solid running back, and he's 5'8", but that size at 210, those guys are sometimes hard to tackle.
Yeah.
And I think he'll do really well. Obviously, I'm a much higher on him than Bucky Irving, and so if he gets to Dallas, that might be fun.
Oh, I didn't think about that. Yeah, Marshawn Lloyd, the Cowboy, for sure, and he's a splashy Southern Cal guy. I mean, Jerry Jones has to love that, right? So yeah, that's something pretty compelling, Stu. Let's shift to receiver here. This draft, I think, is going to be so much fun for super flexers because in the top 10 picks alone, you could, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there's a non-zero chance of 4 quarterbacks going off the board, 1 tight end, and 3 receivers in Harrison, Neighbors, and Odunze. Now, let's take those 3 receivers out of the equation because there's a lot of good receivers in this draft. Do you have a favorite rookie receiver not named Harrison, Neighbors, or Odunze?
Yeah, boy. I mean, obviously, Odunze's the man. Brian Thomas, LSU. He basically, 6'4", 205 pounds. They're saying he's sort of a Mike Williams type, that taller type of receiver. And so if he goes into a system where there's a true dominant number one, so he doesn't get double teamed out of the gate, and he can learn the NFL and sort of get used to these very big, fast secondary guys, got ready to light him up, that he might really do very well.
He needs some polish, right? He kind of reminds me of Mike Williams coming out in the draft, in the fact that these are big guys, 50-50 guys that can go up and get it, but they do need some refinement on route running and just becoming a professional receiver. I think the tools are there for Thomas to do it. And like you said, if he lands in the right situation as a number 2, I think that he could be very, very good. Now, at the same time, I don't know if he's ever going to project to be a number 1 receiver. Like if whoever that number 1 there is that he gets drafted next to moves on, I don't know if he'll ever be a de facto number 1 receiver. He could, and I could be wrong about that. But I feel like as fun as it is to project what his frame could do in the pros, I also think that I feel like there's other higher upside guys that are going to go in the first round too. Now, I could be wrong on this too. He played opposite Malik Neighbors, had a really talented quarterback throwing to him in Jaden Daniels. So I don't know if he made them better or they made him better or if it was a combination. Thomas is interesting. And I would think at this point, if the NFL draft happened today, and it's all about fit, obviously, but Stu, I think he's the number 4 receiver off the board, right?
Yep. I think right.
Let's go here to Permar 99. Doesn't matter where Brock Bowers goes. He's the second best tight end to come out since Kyle Pitts. Now, that may be true. And I think what's interesting about Bowers, in an FFPC tight end premium dynasty league, Bowers obviously moves up the board. How many tight ends right now in the NFL, if you were doing a dynasty startup, Stu, and you were deciding on tight end, how many tight ends would you rather have than Brock Bowers in a dynasty startup?
Boy, big difference there, because on redraft, he probably wouldn't even be in the top 12. But for dynasty, oh man, he would probably be in that top 5.
So who would you put in front of? Like Laporta would be in front of him, right? I'd put Kincaid in front of him. But then after that, like obviously I'm not putting Andrews or Kelsey in front of him anymore. I'm trying, and we already talked about Pitts. I'm trying to think who else am I forgetting? Oh, Trey McBride. Dynasty startup. McBride over Bowers?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And the question is TJ Hawkinson or not. But it really depends on who the quarterback in Minnesota, and they're pretty much saying, obviously, Minnesota's got to get a quarterback.
I think that whoever drafts Bowers is going to have a plan for him, and that plan is probably going to include a pretty talented quarterback. If that's the case, then I like him better than Hawkinson, because Hawkinson not only has to come back from this ACL, so you might be missing a half season, and if Minnesota's really bad, maybe a full season of Hawkinson. And like you said, they got it. I mean, is it Sam Darnold, that quarterback? Is that what they're going to go with? Are they going to trade up and draft McCarthy or something like that? Like, even if you draft McCarthy, I can't imagine he's going to be your quarterback for 2024. So like that, that even if Hockenson does come back, I don't know how valuable he is with a rookie quarterback. So I think I'd put him ahead of Hockenson, but man, God, that is interesting to try to figure out what's going to go on with Brock Bowers. Permar 99 says he's a good good blocker, a 3-down guy, and I hope that's the case, because if it is, Bowers is going to be up there. He should be like a top 3 tight end dynasty guy for the next decade.
Well, I'm going to throw a goofy one at you. So these
Sure.
different draft boards. So one has them going as number 5 to the Chargers. One has them going number 9 to Chicago. And one has them almost falling out of the first round, going AC at 32.
Wow. Boy, Bowers and Kelsey on the same team. That would be pretty compelling. I think if he slides out of the top 10, there is going to be somebody that will go up and get him at that point. That's just a feeling that I would have. The talent like that, man, if you have all those other teams passing on him in favor of tackles and wide receivers and quarterbacks, somebody's going to come up and get him. Let's do final question here, Stu. A player that you're trying to get on all your dynasty teams, could be a rookie, could be a veteran that you're trying to trade for right now, and then a player that you're trying to get off of your roster onto somebody else's squad before he falls off the proverbial age cliff, before midnight strikes and we realize that this guy was just a flash in the pan. Your thoughts on a player you really want and a player you want to get rid of?
So I've got 3 I'd want and 2 I would like to get rid of. So the ones I want that you and Manning talked about a couple of weeks ago, Derrick Henry, even though he's older, but in Baltimore, that is going to be just fun. And there isn't that many 3-down backs left.
Mm-hmm.
Hollywood Brown for KC. Now, I don't know what's going to happen as it relates to this week's information on Rice. I doubt much because he's already lawyered up. But Hollywood finally getting back to having a decent quarterback is really nice. And then one that's kind of a stretch, it's more of a filler, young guy, but he's pretty much the only, in my opinion, decent tight end on that team, and that's Cade Otton for Tampa Bay. He wouldn't be your number 1, wouldn't be in your top 12, but if you need depth in an FFPC, I have been picking up Otton cheap just because he is cheap, and I like that depth. The guys I'm getting rid of, I got rid of Devontae Adams in one league for the 105. If I get a reasonable first round offer, I'm moving Adams. I have no idea who his quarterback's going to be. I love the talent, love the player. It's just one of those where it's getting near the midnight on his career, and I don't want to be. If I can still get a first for him, I'd rather sell him a year or 2 early.
Yeah.
Than wait on that one. And one I can't freaking get rid of for anything is Waller. What the heck?
Waller is okay. So there's a lot to unpack here, Stu. I want to go back to the players you want, and let's talk about Derrick Henry first. Dynasty purposes, if you need a running back on your team and you are in a championship window, how high of a draft pick would you be willing to part for what might only be 1 year of Derrick Henry?
Yeah, a late second, 3rd round pick would probably be it.
Okay, so mid-second, you're saying no. You'd rather have the mid-second than Henry.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So there we are on that. Now, this is on me. I should have brought this up. This Rashee Rice thing. So I've seen a couple of Drew Davenport from Football Guys, really respected lawyer. He kind of talked about this in a it's like a 20-tweet thread, and he basically say the TLDR version is he doesn't think that you need to be making any sort of rash decisions with Rice. Don't sell him for cheap. Don't necessarily acquire him everywhere, but you don't need to be selling him for cheap. This Rice situation, if you have, do you have Rashee Rice on many of your rosters? What are you doing with them, Stu?
I actually am in about 4 of my rosters, and the information keeps coming out, gets borderline more bizarre. Today, I heard both the Corvette and I think it was Lamborghini were
Yep.
leased. He had both cars. And it's like, what the heck were you doing? Racing a buddy, I guess.
So the thing with him, with Rashee Rice, you're holding him. Would you sell him for like 80 cents on the dollar, or is it not worth it to do that at this point?
I think he's too talented on too powerful of an offense. And even with the addition of Hollywood Brown, there's just too much upside. If I'm going down, I'm going all the way down.
Right. Okay. And then Marquise Brown, let's just say Rashee Rice is fine. He's good. He's playing week 1, or even if he gets suspended a week or two, what have you. What does Marquise Brown do with the Chiefs this year?
I think, they need someone who can actually catch, and, it's just sort of a helpful sort of thing. I think, he can still stretch the field. He's not as fast as he used to be, but he can catch the ball.
He can catch the ball. Permar says ADP 27 for Rashee Rice right now. I think that might be a little too far. Well, no, I mean, I guess if that's overall, I can get on board with that, but definitely too far for receivers. We covered a lot of ground tonight, Stu. This is a lot of fun. We learned about your thoughts on Derrick Henry. We found out about Bucky Irving. We learned about your love affair, or like affair, let's say, with Marshawn Lloyd. And we figured out that Devin Singletary is a player we can all rally around and agree that, yes, nobody loves him, but we can all tolerate him, and he's going to be a good buy this year. You are always a good buy to have on this show, so I bid you goodbye. Good luck in all of your Dynasty leagues this year. I know you're going to add some more championships this year, as you do as well. Before I let you go, you're in the sign up for the Genesis draft that we'll be broadcasting live on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour the Friday after the NFL draft. And then are you making an appearance in Louisville this year at the KFFSC?
I am. I told Farrell I've got my flights, got the hotel booked, and so I'll be able to meet you in person and meet Farrell, and Jake might, 26er might come down for it. So I will see you in Louisville.
Apologize for that, everybody. We had a snowstorm, believe it or not, in in northeast Wisconsin tonight. And I just briefly lost power here, so I do apologize for that. And Stu, I apologize for you having to carry the show. So here's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to cut the show off now. We could have another power outage here. I don't know what's going to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, myffpc.com, your home for the Empire Leagues, your home for Dynasty, Orphans, Dynasty Startups, the Fantasy Pros Championship, where you can win $1 million, and of course, the Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments as well. We will be back live Thursday night on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on all these FFPC socials, as well as the Better Sports Network. Garrett Price from Dynasty Nerds will be my guest from 7 until 9. And then Friday night, Farrell Elliott, the aforementioned Farrell Elliott, and I will chop it up at 10 p.m. Eastern time on Friday. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We will go live once again with this show coming up on the first Tuesday in May. which will be, I believe, let's see, what would that be? I think it'd be May 6th. We will go live again. That's when the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown will go live again. So I do apologize for the weird ending to this show. I apologize to Stew Kuehne as well. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I will talk with you or speak with you and hang out with you Thursday night on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter @RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.